When the user first installs MarcEdit, MarcEdit initiates a startup wizard. The startup wizard was brought into MarcEdit in MarcEdit 7 and MarcEdit 3 for the Mac version. It was really designed to do two things. One, to simplify the process of installing the application and configuring the preferences that were necessary in order to allow MarcEdit to understand the type of records that you're working with. The other one was just to be fun. Used to be that when you installed MarcEdit, it would actually open the preferences window, and what I found was that in a lot of cases, users wouldn't understand what they were looking at or why specific preferences were important. Users are given two options. One, they can just say no, and MarcEdit will configure the application using the settings that work best for Mark 21, or you can go ahead and walk through the settings, in which case the application will guide you through a set of processes. The first one being looking for appearance. It's looking for a default font. Font is important if you're working with Unicode data. It's looking specifically for a couple of fonts that are well-known Unicode-specific fonts. The Noto Sans is the one being looked for by default, but it also looks for the Microsoft MS Arial Unicode font, which is becoming a little bit less common as users transition to new machines, given that Microsoft has kind of phased that out as part of their distribution, as well as a couple of other open fonts. This is where you can set your default font. This will be applied across the application, as well as recommended font sizes. And if you want to set a theme, by default you have a dark theme, a white theme, and a gray theme. Set your settings here, and then you move on to the next step. MarcEdit's mark agnostic, so you tell it a little bit about what your data looks like. So is your data Mark 21, Unimark, or something else? That's actually important for the application to know, because if you're converting data from one character encoding to another, there are bytes within the leader that need to be modified in order for local ILS systems to determine what format the data is in, whether it's in Unicode or something else. The application asks you for the default record encoding. By and large, most people will use the Mark 8 to UTF-8 encoding, so that's set by default. But if you're working from outside the United States, you may be using something like Big 5 or a local character encoding that's not UTF-8. So this is where you can tell MarcEdit that this is the encoding that's being used. Whether or not you need to force Unicode normalization, by default that's selected. Unicode normalization gets treated as using the standard Library of Congress recommends for Mark 8 data. That's going to be the compatibility composition for UTF-8 data, so that means if you have a diacritic, that diacritic will be represented as 2 code points rather than a single code point as part of the canonical representation, that you can change that within the preferences later. MarcEdit includes 2 XML processing engines, the MSXML and Saxon. By default, it'll choose the MSXML that supports xQuery 1 and XSLT1. If you need to support xQuery 2, 3, if you want to support XSLT 2 or 3, select Saxon. We move on to the next step. If you're working with an older version of MarcEdit, then you'll see this step, which allows you to migrate your data from the old version of MarcEdit into the new version. And then finally, when it's finished doing the process, it will have done the configurations, and the application will be ready to start, and you'll be configured appropriately based on the options that you've selected.